the government will continue to spend billions of pounds to pay the salaries of millions of workers for months to come, as it promised to protect the jobs of those furloughed until October. Now, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak said the scheme introduced to prevent mass redundancies needed to adapt as the economy reopens. Employers will have to contribute around 5% of salaries from August, rising to just over 20% before the scheme runs out at the end of October. Now, the programme currently supports more than 8.5 million employees, with people able to go back to work part-time from July. The Chancellor also pledged to extend support for the 2.5 million self-employed who now receive grants through to August. The estimated cost of both schemes stands at around £100 billion. Well, the news comes as the number of people with COVID-19 whose deaths have been reported in the last 24 hours stood at 324. This brings the total number of deaths to 38,161. With the latest, here's our economics editor, Faisal Islam.
When the pubs don't open, neither do the brewers. And so the government's job scheme has helped hugely. Keep 8.5 million workers on payrolls, on tap effectively, including here at wildcard breweries. But any change to that generosity might push some over the edge.
It wouldn't be viable for us, for the furlough scheme to diminish and us to contribute more if we don't have clarity as to what is going on. Because at the end of the day, if a bar is closed and there is no money coming in, how are you supposed to financially contribute to that scheme? That is just simply going to mean lots and lots of people out of work.
At least those 8.5 million workers will now continue to get the bulk of their wages paid for by the taxpayer. In July, this can now be on a part-time basis, offering flexibility for companies phasing workers back to work. In August, the government will continue to pay 80% of salary, but firms will have to pay national insurance and pensions, about 5% on average. Then in September, the taxpayer contribution will go down to 70% and then 60% in October. A further 2.5 million self-employed workers at least will be eligible for a slightly less generous grant, representing 70% of wages over 3 months, capped at £6,500. The car industry today revealed a 99.7% slump in sales in April. That's one reason why the total cost of both these unprecedented schemes is heading towards £100 billion of essentially borrowed money, about the same as is spent over that 8-month period as on the NHS. But the Chancellor says it's still value for money.
First of all, in aggregate, the scheme is, I think, very generous. 8 months is a long time to have the support. If you look at the total employer contribution over that entire period on a typical employee, average employee on the scheme, it will amount to the employer making a 5% contribution.
The opposition says it's taking risks with unemployment.
Some sectors, like, for example, hospitality, look like they could be locked down for really quite a long time. They're not going to have the cash flow necessarily to have employers paying in to support staff. So this could lead potentially to major job losses.
The government has a delicate three-way balancing act between controlling the pandemic, saving jobs and the cost to the taxpayer. Its essential judgment today is to carry on spending generously more than expected. And that means a third of the workforce, 11 million workers, will continue to have the vast bulk of their wages funded by the taxpayer for most of the year. It is the self-employed, like Iona Fife, a folk singer, who feel relieved by the announcement, yes, but still concerned about the future.
First, I am very much appreciative that we are going to be supported until August. I worry about my ability to keep touring and keep being a musician, especially after years and years of training and graduating with a degree in music. It's very heartbreaking.
But the Treasury say that the self-employed were already treated differently, for example, being allowed to carry on working while claiming the support. The message from the Chancellor that his spending will continue through this summer, but as the economy reopens, it must then come to an end. Faisal Islam, BBC News.
Well, our chief political correspondent Vicky Young is at Westminster. Vicky, these schemes, they've saved millions of jobs. They're very popular. Tricky then for Mr Sunak to be changing them.
Yeah, I think the Chancellor might look back and think, well, announcing all that help with broad political backing, well, that might have been the easy bit. Taking it away even gradually without causing a real spike in unemployment could well be a lot more difficult. Now, he's talked before about the country heading for a recession. Today, he talked about hardship because he can't save every job. And there are many who think that crunch point could be coming quite soon. Just look at the hospitality industry. If you have a restaurant, you haven't had income for months, you've got no guaranteed opening date, you've got no guarantee that customers will come back in the same way. There could be social distancing restrictions. So even contributing a tiny part of the wages in August might not be remotely possible. Now, the government has been dealing with this terrible health crisis. It looks like there's an economic one coming down the track. There's been massive state intervention, really like a huge dose of painkiller, but the Chancellor today making it clear that it's going to hurt when it wears off.
OK, Vicky, thank you. Vicky Young there at Westminster.